All right, there we go. Welcome back, folks, to another one of these talk sessions. Joining me this time is quite an accomplished person. He's a co-author. He's head of dev at Uffizi. Sorry, I was going to say it wrong again. And more
TFC.
impressive, yeah. And the list of impressive stuff just goes on, right? Because also a highly decorated Navy SEAL. I mean, I thought I'd accomplished something in life. I looked at the things I've done, but you've just outshone me completely. So I think it's only fair that you take the stage. Josh Thurman, please take it away with your talk.
Thank you, Darren. Good to see everyone. I would say good morning. I know it's afternoon there, but it is 4 a.m. here stateside, and so any apologies for my foggy thinking this morning. I'm super excited to be here and get to chat with you about something near and dear to my heart. So CP, so continuous previews, adding that to your CI/CD. So building in a process for automated on-demand test environments. And today we're going to talk about why that'll improve the efficiency with which you test and how you can get rid of your dirty environments problem. So without any further ado, let me jump to the slides here. So the agenda for this morning. So first we're going to talk about how we all have a dirty environments problem. It's not just you, it's across the industry. We're going to talk about the challenges of dirty environments, the challenges they pose to our development velocity, how they have inefficiencies built in. Then, of course, I'm going to solve my problem with continuous previews. So on-demand, ephemeral, isolated environments that we can spin up for every new feature branch. Talk about the cascading series of benefits that come with continuous previews. And then we'll jump into a live interactive demo where I'll be showing that off. And then we'll end up with some Q&A after that. Okay, so first let's frame the problem. So we have persistent environments and we have shared environments. And that means they're inherently dirty. And so what do I mean by that? So if I have a persistent environment, it's been long running, right? So I have things like history associated with it, entropy and drift, right? So little changes that have been made to my infrastructure can then persist for a long time. Maybe, depending on how good my GitOps is, maybe something that's forgotten, and it can create problems for me, right? But that's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is when I have a shared environment, right? So I'm taking a single environment and I'm consistently putting new feature branches in that environment. I'm introducing new variables, and that creates problems for us, right? We have to sometimes coordinate over that shared environment. Sometimes the whole environment goes down, and then also sometimes we have bugs that are introduced, and we have to manually trace those. So we have dirty environments. Let's figure out how we can make them get clean environments. Okay, so for my dirty environment, let's talk about some of the challenges that come with them. So one is just they're inherently unstable, right? When you're constantly merging new code into a single shared environment, over time, you're going to have breakage, right? Either, again, the whole environment will go down, or I'm going to introduce bugs that are going to slow everyone down. I'm a visual guy, so I like to think about it like if this were my single shared environment, right? And I'm merging new features in there. I really don't know which one is going to blow the thing up, right? So I can't necessarily merge with confidence when I just broke my QA environment, and now everyone who was going to merge in that is like in a holding pattern, right? So my senior developer is going to have to spend time going and figuring that out. Either I brick the whole environment, maybe I brick the database or some other significant issue, or I have a bug that's been introduced, which is creating so many problems that no one else can merge into that environment, right? And that naturally creates huge inefficiencies. So there's delayed access there, right? Everyone else here is in a holding pattern, can't push their feature through while that's going on. And as your team grows, this problem grows exponentially, right? So you can imagine the more and the faster I'm putting issues in, and boom, I have all kinds of problems, right? So this is like what I would consider to be bad science. So when we're using persistent test environments, it's like running a science experiment and changing more variables than is absolutely necessary. In science, we wouldn't do that. In software development, we do it, and we do it because there hasn't been any other good alternatives, right? Environments are hard. Um, Typically takes a little while to set them up. And once they're running, we typically don't want to touch them. But that's what we're going to talk about continuous previews today. So CP in the intro of my talk, adding CP to your CI/CD. CP equals continuous previews. So it's a capability and a process of rapidly, so CRUD, being able to create, update, and delete production-like cloud-based test environments. And there's 4 major characteristics we want to think about. The biggest one is that they're clean. So when I have a new environment, it doesn't have any history associated with it, and it's just for my feature branch. It's not meant for everyone else's feature branch on the team. Okay, so they are on demand. So I spin them up in response to a need to test a new feature branch. They're ephemeral, so they're meant to be short-lived. They have a purpose-driven life cycle. They only exist as long as I need to test my specific feature or topic branch. And lastly, they are isolated. So this kind of goes along with clean, but what I mean is each feature and branch can have its own environment. And again, I'm not sharing those. So let's look at, to refine what we're talking about here, continuous previews and branching. So if I have a topic branch that I'm working on, I can spin up an environment in response to that branch. And as I'm iterating through that, I can get feedback, either unofficial feedback, right, that I might want to ask from the product team or my testers, or I can run automated tests against that environment. And then I can get a final thumbs up. So as I iterate through, I can test my full stack environment in a production like cloud environment. And when it's good to go, I get the functional test, thumbs up. All my tests have passed. Again, both automated and manual. I can do exploratory testing against a preview URL. And when that's good to go, I can then merge with confidence, knowing I have a clean feature. So let's compare and contrast a little bit what it's like using persistent or shared dirty environments versus ephemeral and isolated test environments. So again, if I have a persistent shared test environment and I have multiple developers contesting that environment, I really don't know which commit and which commingled code is going to create problems for me. All right, that creates uncertainty and it creates inefficiency, right? Whereas if I have ephemeral or isolated test environments, I can have one environment for every feature branch, and those can move forward in parallel without impacting each other. And that's good, right? That's what I would describe as good science. And so if I'm using continuous previews, I'm going to have a cascading series of benefits associated with that. The number one is, instead of having delayed access to a test environment, maybe having to be in a holding pattern like I described earlier, I have unlimited access to test environments. So every developer on my team can have a test environment, and I can spin them up when I need them. So I can have a test environment when I need it for as long as I need it. And I can have as many as I want. We'll talk about, so this gets me into a process of good science, right? So if I have a brand new test environment that is clean, I have fewer variables to test against. And that reduces the time I have to spend manually tracing bugs. Another great benefit is when I have an on-demand environment, if I break it, I can just throw it away and get a new one. I don't have to worry about a breakage slowing down the whole team. What's great too is if I break it, I can go figure out why it broke, and then I won't break the next one because I'm going to make the appropriate changes. And then I can do parallelization of feature improvements. So all my features can progress simultaneously without impacting each other. Of course, This enables me to iterate quickly. So if I'm a developer on the team and I'm working on a feature, I can bring in a tester, product, any of my other key stakeholders, and there's no distance, both literal and figural, between me and that other person who's helping me test this code. So as I'm pushing new commits, they can be reviewing them, and we can go through that process near simultaneously, which prevents any delays. And the last one, I put this at the end because in our industry, saving money is certainly important, but it's not as valuable as time. The first four issues are all related to improving efficiency, improving our time, and particularly in software, the faster you move, we know how valuable that is. But it's important to note, if I'm using these ephemeral environments, if I'm using continuous previews, I'm also going to save money. And that's because these environments run for a limited amount of time. They're only stood up in response to needing to test. So I'm not going to run them at night. I'm not going to run them on the weekends or holidays. And the net total is I'm going to have a 75% reduction in the time running. So if you think about, an 8-hour workday, 5 days a week, and then you come up with all those hours and divide it by the total hours in a month where your persistent static environments are running, it ends up being only about 25% of the time. And that's a huge, naturally that translates into a huge cost savings. All right, so how can we achieve continuous previews with open source? Let's get to the sexier part of this talk. We'll get into the live demo. So what I'm showing here is you can use any CI/CD system. You're gonna need to define your application in Docker Compose. You need Ufeezy installed on your Kubernetes cluster. And of course, you need a Kubernetes cluster to host these lightweight preview environments. And in the bottom of my slides here, if you want to check out that repo, you can read more about Ufeezy as we're going through here. And before I get into the live demo, I want to talk about the key steps. So today for the demo, I'm going to use GitHub Actions. Again, I could use any CI/CD system where I can set up triggers, jobs, and an overall workflow. The key step today that I'm going to be showing off is the Ufeezy preview step. So CRUD, so create, update, and delete. And I've got 3 GitHub actions associated with that. I've got a preview environment create, I've got preview environment update, and preview environment delete. And when I'm running that phase of my workflow, that GitHub action, what's happening is the Ufeezy CLI is sending a command. It'll be Ufeezy preview create, and it's going to reference a compose file, my Docker compose file. It's going to pass that to Ufeezy app. Ufeezy app will take that compose, and it's going to generate some deployment parameters. It'll pass that to our controller, which will then talk to the Golang client API, and then that gets translated into a Kubernetes spec, and voila, I get a preview deployment or a preview environment on a pod and a namespace on my cluster. So let's see how that works. Okay, so situation is I am one of several developers on my team. I am working on a microservices application. I'm working on one specific component of it. This particular app is the dogs versus cats voting app. Again, it's a multi-service microservice application. And let me boost this up so you guys can see. Hopefully that's better. So, okay, so I'm on the branch double dogs, and the change I have made to my local environment here, my local Git repo is I have rewritten the function so when dogs get voted for, it counts the vote twice. And so I've worked on that. I've tested it locally. Now I'm ready for my next phase of testing. And so I'm going to open a pull request associated with that. and submit that. Great. So I've just opened pull request number 5 in my repo, and let's go take a look at what that initiated. Okay, so I can see my PRs here, and I've got my double dogs that I just opened, and I can see in GitHub that something's working here. So let's drill in and see what's going on. So when I opened that pull request, that initiated one of my GitHub Actions workflows. And so the first step of this is we're going to be building from source all the services that comprise this application. And once those are built, they're going to get pushed to my container registry. In this case, I'm using Docker Hub, but I can use any container registry. And then I'm going to get into the step that I talked about, where we're going to do creating the Ufeezy preview environment. And so that's happening right now. So let's go ahead and drill down and look at the details. Okay, so I see now that we're in the deploy preview step. And let me back up a little bit while that's working. Okay, so first in this action, we set up the job. We pulled a curl image because I'm going to do an HTTP check on this before it's complete as part of the automated process. I'm pulling the Ufeezy CLI into this, or GitHub actually is pulling the Ufeezy CLI into the GitHub runner so it can run its command. I'm checking out the associated Git repos, and I'm doing that because I have a Docker Compose template that is going to be rendered dynamically. That's happening here in this step. So when I'm rendering my compose, looks like it completed there. Okay, so I'm going to zoom my screen a little bit to make it a little bit. Okay, that's probably better. So I mentioned earlier that the application is defined in Docker Compose. So what we are doing uniquely with Ufeezy is we're taking your Docker Compose specification, something that developers use every day, something that they run locally, and then we're going to translate that into a deployment on Kubernetes. So in effect, we're trying to shift the infrastructure left to the developers so they can make the changes they need as they need them and be able to self-serve preview environments for their specific use cases without having to request help or get assistance from whoever's running your DevOps or your ops side of the house. And in this compose, so you can see everything. All these are my services. So I've got a couple of official images that are just getting pulled straight from Docker Hub. And then I've got worker, result, and vote. So these are my custom components that my team is working on. And I mentioned this is going to get dynamically rendered. So the images that were just built, when I open my pull request with my GitHub Actions, those are going to get tagged with a name like this. And so at this phase, those specific images are going to get referenced and they're going to get pulled again from Docker Hub and deployed to my Kubernetes cluster. I want to highlight one piece. What is outside of maybe what you normally see in Compose is that I have a Ufeezy extension. So this X dash construct enables this to be a valid Compose file without breaking it. But if I'm using it in the context of the Ufeezy CLI, I'm defining an ingress. So again, Docker Compose locally, I don't necessarily need an ingress. I access individual containers as I need to. In a production-like cloud environment, I need to choose one service that's going to be receiving my HTTP traffic, and that is I've got a mock-up load balancer here. It's actually it's a custom Nginx, and I'm defining a port that it's listening on. So that's really the main thing that is different from your local Docker Compose. I need to have, it's a requirement. I've got to have this. The other element you might need to identify here is a memory requirement. So Ufeezy defaults to building containers that are 125 megabytes. You can set higher memory limits for specific containers, like I did here on the worker component. And I'm saying, hey, this needs a little bit more memory. Let's give it 250 megabytes. Of course, I can set that up to several gigabytes if I need to. The same is true on this vote component. It's going to need a little bit more memory. So that's what I've done here. Okay, let's look at the deploy preview. So this was really the most important step here. So the CLI, basically we did a Docker run, a bunch of commands. We're effectively wrapping the CLI with a bunch of commands. And there's the most important piece. So the Ufeezy CLI runs preview create, the output of our previous GitHub action, which is this Docker Compose rendered. So again, it's been dynamically generated. And that is the action that is actually going to create my preview environment on my cluster. And then there's some sort of cleanup items here, checking the outputs. We're going to confirm we have a successful preview deployment. So this is what I have my curl image here for, is it's going to do an HTTP check on my preview environment. So on that preview URL, and that will let me know if the service is up and running, or all my services are up and running. And then these are some other closeout issues. Another key step is the preview URL that is created for my on-demand environment. We're going to take that and post it as a comment in my pull request. So let's go check that out now, and let's see if our change is good to go. So let's go into my PR, and here is my preview URL. So I'll just take a moment to pause here. What's great about this is if you're a DevOps professional, you set this up for your team. One person can set it up, and every developer is going to benefit with on-demand preview environments, right? Because it's going to be fully automated. Your developers don't even need to context switch. They can just open and close PRs, and all this will happen for them. So let's go check. Okay, so my application is up here, and the change, let's go vote here and check out my change. Okay, so I voted for dogs, and I voted one time and I got 2 votes, so that's good to go. So I know that my change here, I've tested it, right? I could have run an automated test against this. Of course, I just did a manual test to confirm that this is good to go. And now I know my change is good. And so I can merge this with confidence. So I just did the preview create. And previously I mentioned we want to CRUD, right? We want to be able to create, we want to be able to update, and we want to be able to delete our previews. So on the update side, let's say that there's another change. Maybe I get feedback that this is not quite right, and I want to, I need to make another change to this specific branch. So let's go back into my code editor, and what I'm going to do here is let's make another change. Let's say the request was I want to change the color of the background. Okay, so I'm going to make that change. Okay, and let's go ahead and commit that. Okay, so I've committed that locally, and let's push it. Okay, so I just pushed that change to my remote GitHub repo, and let's see what happened as a result of that. Okay, so when I did that, I'm now running a workflow that is update my preview environment. So what's great about this is I just did my deployment. I have my preview URL. Now I've git pushed. I've made a change, and I want that change to go live in my environment. But I don't want my URL to change. I'm not looking to stand up a brand new environment on top of the one that I already created. I want to update the existing one behind its existing URL. So this workflow is enabling me to do that. So we're still going to go through the build process here. We're going to build our images from source as we just did. And of course, we'll have that recent change in the Double Dogs branch where I just changed the background color from black to white. So just went through all the build phases. And then let's take a look at the update action here. So this is similar, almost identical to when I created my preview environment. All the same steps are going to happen, but when we get down to updating my preview environment, we're going to run a different command with the CLI. It'll be Ufeezy preview update. And of course, Ufeezy's doing the logic, the magic there to make sure I can keep my same preview URL. We'll wait on that here. While we're waiting, feel free to drop any questions in the chat, or just let me know how this is going, if this is interesting, and if this is something that's valuable for you. I'd love to get some feedback going in the chat here. Okay, so that's wrapping up. Okay, so this whole step is, I got my green check. I'm done here. All right, so let's go back. And let us check. Oh, excuse me. Let's go back and check my original URL. And good to go. So I went from black to white, right? So I've pushed my new change. There it is. And whoever's reviewing this for me can give me the thumbs up. And now I'm ready to merge my changes. So let's move on to that phase of it. Okay, so we're gonna do now that I'm excuse me, done with my environment, I can get rid of it, right? So close my PR out and let's wipe out the entire environment. So the pod that I have it running on, all the containers, the networking, my dynamic DNS, my certificate, let's get rid of all of it in one step. So let's go back. And we will check. Okay, so I just closed my pull request. And what I expect to see is that kicked off an action to delete all of these services associated with my on-demand environment. Okay, so I can see that this closed out. And let's go check my GitHub actions to see that. Okay, so these are all my workflow runs. Of course, GitHub makes it nice and organized here. And I can see this is my delete preview action. So let's drill down into here. And so that ran and it's complete. And so the key step was this piece here. So I'm going to delete my preview from Ufeezy. Again, I am running the Docker, or excuse me, the Ufeezy CLI, and I'm giving it the command preview delete. And then there's some more cleanup steps here. And let's go check what happens if I click on that URL? Is it, let's make sure that it's gone. Okay, so back to my pull request. Here was my preview URL, and I'm going to get a 404 because it no longer exists. So there it is. So the value here, of course, being I'm one engineer on the team. I could have had as many environments as I have pull requests. Of course, pull requests representing a feature branch, and I can have those features progress again unfettered. Right there's no limit to my access. I don't have to worry about a shared environment that might have bugs in it or otherwise might be broken. So that concludes the demo. I hope you enjoyed it. And let me bump over to wrap up my talk here. Okay, so in summary, so continuous previews, if I could wrap this up, I'm using clean, on-demand, ephemeral, and isolated test environments. So I apologize for the extra marketing nomenclature here of continuous previews, but I needed a way to capture what I mean by, a lot of people are using, well, we have on-demand environments, we have ephemeral environments, we have isolated environments. That doesn't really capture all the key characteristics that I'm looking for, right? Which is clean, on-demand, ephemeral, and isolated. Okay, this is obviously going to increase my efficiency significantly. It's going to help me iterate quickly. It's going to lower my cost because these environments are hardly running. They're only running a fourth of the time that a static environment or persistent environment would be. And then if I want to get specific about my KPIs, my key performance indicators for my team, I'm going to have improvements in my lead time, my cycle time, my team velocity, and my code stability. And all of that means I can ship new features faster to my end user, which is, of course, what it's all about. And that's why we want to do this. Let me drop these in the, I'll drop these in the chat. But if you want to follow up with this, so our open source, it's been recently released. Last week we were at KubeCon and got some awesome feedback and a few folks lining up to contribute. Go on, follow that repo. When we release new updates, it'll be there. You can star that and keep it in your key repos. One of the major updates we're going to make soon is we're going to adopt this to be able to ingest Helm as opposed to just Docker Compose. That was some great feedback we got. And then my second reference here, if you're interested in following this specific demo, you want to set this up for yourself, we set up a DevOps Pro Europe 2022 repo under Uffizi Cloud, and you can follow all that there. And I will drop all these in the chat so that everyone can check them out. And then lastly, if you enjoyed this, if this is something valuable to you, we're going to be doing a full-on workshop. It's going to probably take several hours, but we're going to use Helm to install Uffizi and all its dependencies on your cluster for our workshop. And then we will help you set up your Docker Compose with an ingress, and then also the GitHub Actions for create previews, update previews, and delete preview environments so that your team can take advantage of this unique capability. We're doing that next week. It's going to be 10 a.m. where you are, so GMT +3 on Tuesday, May 31st. And here is the link. You can find it under the workshops under devopspro.it. That's going to be myself and our senior cloud architect, Adam Volworth, leading that. So thank you very much. That is all I had. Again, I'll drop those links in the chat, but I'd love to get some Q&A going here.
All right, you heard him, folks. Get your questions in while we still have them. Thank you, Josh. That was really informative, and really big shout out to you for getting up so early. I think you said it's 3 a.m.
Yeah, well, it's 4:40 now, but I had to get to work at 3:30 today, so it was an early day. It's okay. I used to do that often in the military. So I'm
Yeah, I can
used.
imagine it. It kind of preps you. You probably like, okay, those days are behind me. No, no waking up that early again. But here you are. We
Yeah,
appreciate you for it.
I'd hope to leave it behind.
Hey, I mean, especially when you hear all the good things about like, working in tech, it's like, yeah, usually it's like that there is crunch, but usually like most people understand you don't get more than like 8 hours of good work out of someone. So that they won't do the crunch time too often. But you've
That's
been kind of
right.
on the European clock, right? Because you've been busy with the conferences, so this has been getting you prepped for it.
Yeah, that's right. So we just, gosh, we've been hitting the conference scene. It's conference season, right?
Yeah.
And so 2 weeks ago we did DockerCon. I gave a talk there. We wrote a extension for Docker Desktop, so you can get the Uffizi Cloud version, which is fully self-hosted. All you have to do is bring your Docker Compose to us, and we handle the rest. That's now accessible on Docker Desktop. So we're a Docker extensions partner. So we did that release 2 weeks ago, and then last week we were a sponsor at KubeCon. That was in Valencia. Beautiful place if you haven't been there, right down on the Mediterranean. And we had an awesome time there. Got a lot of energy from that. And then now, unfortunately we couldn't do this in person. I would have loved to go to Lithuania, but I'm here in Tennessee, and I'm still getting to talk to the lovely people there across Europe, and that's great.
Yeah, and really big shout out for them to actually, pivot this last second and make sure that we still got to talk to people like you and get this sort of information. Otherwise, it might be lost to our viewers. But I guess like I'll open up with one kind of question that came to mind is, like who's your competitor with Uffizi and why do you think Uffizi trumps them?
Yeah, so there are other people doing preview environments. We're really the only fully open source tool, and
Mhm.
so we're trying to set a standard for the community where for people to use preview environments. And so we'll be coming out with sort of a definitive guide on how to use preview environments because it does get tricky, right? I did a toy app, right, for this demonstration, but when you start dealing with data, um, how do you seed your database? How do you make sure that you have mock-up services that make it production like? Can you get away with only using critical services and not some of your third-party services? So those are all questions that are in people's minds, and we're working to define those, of course, with the community, which is awesome. People are really excited about this project. Um, Being able to take the Uffizi CLI, download it from Docker Hub, add it into your workflow, and your team can get this capability. It's not something that's been readily accessible, and so that's our main difference from the competitor. So you can have this right now on your own infrastructure. The documentation's there. You can set it up, and of course, we monetize we have a fully hosted cloud SaaS version, which is for teams who don't, it doesn't necessarily make sense for them to spend the time self-hosting, right? That does take some time and some maintenance associated with that, and we can get you up and running in less than an hour when you show up on our site. So for people who are interested in that, that's at uffizi.com.
Yeah. Be sure to check that out, folks. I mean,
Yeah.
I like that kind of approach, right? It's that so it sounds like you're kind of focused on allowing the integration, but at the same time, you don't want to gatekeep people out. And obviously, with these type of tools, when people pick these things up, usually they get comfortable. Usually, they stick with them for years. So it sounds like you're trying to become like the mainstay, the most accessible one possible.
Yeah, that's right. We want to be accessible. It's a new way of doing business, and I think the more comfortable you can make people by being transparent, uh, the greater chances this we can all be successful together.
Yeah. And it sounds like you'll make yourself readily available. So I guess we'll probably round this up now, as it looks like the one or two questions that were asked were actually answered by some helpful people in the chat ahead of time. So
Okay.
shout out to them for being helpful with that. But yes, just to kind of recap on where people can get your product and where they can maybe discuss things with you further.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm trying to. Should I drop these links in the chat of the Q and
Go
A?
for it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let me.
So if you go to chat and because you're on the backstage,
Yeah.
if you go click public, you'll be able to drop it there.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I noticed you've been sending one or two
Yeah.
in
Oh
the
gosh.
backstage. I was like, well,
So
thank you.
I've
I
been
have the
missing this
info.
the whole time. I haven't been in the public mode. Gosh. Well, I. Yeah. I hope people have been
So
enjoying this. I wasn't getting to it. All right, I'm going to drop links right now. So the first one I'm going to drop is some in the, excuse me, the public chat. Check out our workshop next week. If you haven't signed up for it, we're going to be going step by step for how you can set up this capability on your own Kubernetes cluster. So this is my first link here.
And you said, I think it's 31st of May, and it's going to be a deep dive, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a deep dive. It's a workshop. So we'll have folks on hand to help people out. And yeah, we've got, the whole day. I don't think we'll need it. It'll probably be a 2 or 3 hour workshop. So that's that link. And now, if you're interested in this project that we have going, the open source project, that is going to be this link.
And as you were saying, it's open source, but it's also designed in a way that it can integrate quite easily into existing systems, right?
Yeah, so particularly on the open source side, so it'll integrate with any CI/CD system, and we're continuing to populate the templates, if you will, for every CI/CD system out there right now. GitHub Actions are posted in public, but folks are actually helping us by contributing, writing Uffizi into their CI/CD. So we still need help with Tecton, Jenkins, Circle CI, and GitLab. Obviously, we're just getting started here. So, excuse me, if anyone's interested in that, please open an issue. We've got a public roadmap, and you can open your own issue and then follow it up with a pull request, or let us know how we can work on that.
Yeah, sounds like easily accessible, and sounds like an interesting product. Hopefully, I look forward to seeing how it's actually going to progress from here. But thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure, Josh, especially considering how early it is in the morning for you. I appreciate you getting on with us. We'll bring this to a close, though, so thank you once again. Folks, make sure you hang around, because up next, we're going to have teams and microservice boundaries with domain storytelling. All that in just about 10 minutes.
Awesome. All the links are in the chat, so check them out.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Darren. See you later.